Welcome to this tutorial brought to you by TutVidcom. This is another tutorial in the continuing series of tutorials on web elements inspired by the wonderful folks over at 365psd.com, where you can download a free PSD every single day. Howard from iceflowstudios.com and I are doing this tutorial, and today we're going to take a look at creating this calendar. You can use it as a calendar icon or just calendar artwork in general, or just for planning a web interface or something of that nature later on. So this is the final finished product. Let's get started with it. I've got a new document here that I've opened up, and what I've done, it's a 1280 pixel by 720 pixel tall document, and I've placed in it a dark version of the linen, which you can find on TutVid.com. It's a tutorial that was written by Howard from Iceflow Studios. I will post a link to it in the description of this tutorial. So we're going to start by just working with this linen, and we're going to go ahead and grab our lasso tool. And we're going to create just a very rough selection. I'm just going to create sort of a star selection right in the middle like that. We're going to go select modify feather, and I'm going to feather this by 150 pixels, hit OK, and we're going to go layer, new adjustment layer, levels. And I'm going to name this layer coloring, or just color, because apparently I can't spell. There we go, color. And we're going to set the blend mode to screen. Hit OK, and you're going to see it's just going to drop sort of a spotlight effect in the middle. That's not enough though. I want to add some color. So we're going to play around with the channels here in the adjustments panel. We're going to go to the red channel, and I'm going to drag the black slider, it's the bottom black slider here, over. That's going to dump a little bit of red there into the middle. You see if I pull it way over, we're getting a lot of red. I don't want a lot of red, just a little touch of red. I'm going to go to the green channel, and I'm going to pull the white slider over. That's going to introduce some magenta. Then I'm going to go to the blue slider, and I'm going to pull the black slider in, which is going to introduce a little bit of blue, which is going to give us more of a purpley bluish color. Great. Now, right now, the problem I'm having with this background is it's a little kind of blah still. I want to add some contrast, really make it jump. So I'm going to go layer, new adjustment layer, levels. And I'm just going to set the blend mode of this adjustment layer to soft light. That's all we need to do. And we can even name this layer contrast. Hit OK. And you're going to see it's going to really give our background layer a lot of pop. Now that we've done that, collapse the adjustments panel, make that guy go away, open up your layers panel, and let's create a new layer. Layer, new layer. And we're just going to call this SQ, for lack of a better term. It's just going to be a square. We're going to hit OK. And there's our SQ layer. We're going to grab the rectangular marquee tool. We're going to set the style up here in the tool options bar to fixed size. The width is going to be 30 pixels, and the height's going to be 30 pixels. We're going to drop a selection right there in the middle of our screen, and I'm going to fill it with black. My foreground color is currently black, so I'm going to hit Alt Backspace. I have the option return on the Mac to fill it with black, Command or Control D to deselect. Now that we've done this, before we duplicate this, because this is sort of going to be for every day in our calendar, we need one of these squares. So what we want to do in order to make this much easier to sort of align and adjust, we're going to go up here to View and make sure we have snapping turned on. So it's View Snap. And then under Snap to, just make sure that Snap to Layers is turned on. Now that we've done that, we're going to zoom in a little bit here so we can really get a good look at what we're working on. And I'm going to grab my Move tool. Holding down my Alt or Option key, I'm just going to drag a square straight over to the left, and it's going to immediately click and automatically click, snap to the edge of that other square. Then using my left arrow key, I'm just going to bump it over 1. I'm going to press it once. It's going to bump it over 1 pixel. So there's a 1 pixel gutter between these two squares. I'm going to select both squares by selecting the topmost layer, holding the Shift key, selecting the bottom layer in my Layers panel. Hold down my Alt key again. We're going to copy both of these layers, drag that straight over. And then with these 2 layers selected, hit that left arrow key again to just nudge those 2 layers over 1 pixel. Again, we have 4 squares now, each with a 1 pixel gutter. There's 7 days in a week, so we don't need 8 squares. We only need 7, so I'm going to select the top 3 squares here, hold down my Alt key, drag it right over. It's going to click into place, tap my left arrow key once, and there we go. We have the foundation of our calendar, 1 week for the first portion of our grid. Now that we've done that, we're going to group these guys into a folder. So I'm going to select all of these layers, like so, selecting the bottom layer, hold down my Shift key, select the top layer, hit Command or Control G. Group them into the first layer, and I'm going to name this 5th week. You name 5th week, 5th row, anything like that. Then I'm going to drag this group down to my new layers icon to duplicate it. And I'm going to name this 4th week. And we're going to grab this, well, a little glitch in Photoshop there. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to drag it straight up until I feel it snap. There, it's snapped, and I'm just going to nudge it up 1 pixel. So we're getting this 1 pixel gutter everywhere. Now I'm going to select both of these groups. Again, just like we've been selecting our layers, hold down my Alt key. Don't hold down your Alt key. You can just click and drag these to the new layer icon. It's going to duplicate both of them. Let's drag them both straight up first till we feel it snap, and then nudge it up one. Now we have 4 rows. They're typically 5 rows in a calendar though, so we're going to do a 5th row. Let's name these real quick. 3rd week, and we're going to name this top guy 2nd week. Then I'm going to grab 2nd week and drag it down to the new layer icon and drag it straight up. Feel it snap. I'm going to nudge it up one, and I'm going to rename this 1st week. Now we have the very base level of our grid set up. I'm going to zoom out to 100% by hitting Command or Control 1. We now just need to create 2 more shapes, and then we're ready to start adding some layer styles and making this calendar look like something special. Let's go ahead and create a new layer here, and we're going to call this Day Names. This is going to hold the text, which is going to say, hey, sun, mun, tu, wed, thur, fry, sat, for the abbreviated names of the dates. I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool, and we need to first determine how wide all of these are. So I know how wide it is, but just to show you a quick trick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click one of these squares, and bear in mind we have this 1 pixel gutter which isn't going to be selected. I'm going to shift click the 2nd one, shift click the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. I'm holding on my command or control and shift button while I click those thumbnails. Now what happens if we look at the info panel is we see here a width of 216 pixels. Photoshop is telling us how wide this selection is from the furthest point on the left to the furthest point on the right. It is counting that 1 pixel of space in between these selections. It's saying, hey, this group of selections is 216 pixels from the left side to the right. So just keep that in mind if you're selecting things that are, have a gap between them in your document. So we know that we need a shape that's 216 pixels wide. Let's zoom in here, grab that rectangular marquee tool. We're still in fixed size. We're going to set our width to 216, and we're going to set the height to 15. Now we're going to drop in a shape right there, and I'm just going to zoom in way close so you can see it. I want a 1 pixel gutter here between the top of our date holders and the date name here. So I'm going to grab my rectangular marquee tool, and as long as you see that white arrow, you can use your arrow keys to nudge a selection around. It's not going to move the pixels, just the selection. So I just nudge that selection up 1. And I'm going to fill this guy with black. Command or Control D to deselect. Zoom back out. There we go. Very cool. Now we're going to create another new layer. We're going to name this Month. We're again going to use 216 pixels wide. However, I'm going to go back to my 30 pixel height. We're going to drop a selection in roughly. I'm going to zoom back in, and we're going to hit M, which is going to bring us our marquee tool. And I'm just going to use my arrow keys to perfect the selection. This selection, I don't want a 1 pixel gap between these 2 shapes. I'm going to fill this with black. Alt backspace, Option Return on the Mac. Command or Control D to deselect, and just for the sake of visual reference, I'm going to hit Command or Control U to bring up my hue saturation panel, and I'm just going to make this a little bit brighter just so we can see sort of where our shapes are stopping and starting. Zoom all the way back out, and there we go. Next, let's drop in the grid lines behind the bottom part of our calendar here. We're going to create a layer beneath all of these other shape layers we've just created, or layers with shapes on them we've created. We're going to select this contrast layer, and I'm going to go Layer, New Layer, and I'm going to call this Stroke. I'm going to hit OK. And I want to, again, I'm going to use my marquee tool, and there's a number of ways you can do this. If you measure it out, you can get the size top to bottom. I happen to know that with 30 pixels tall and 30 pixels wide for our squares, I believe the height is 154 pixels, and it looks like that is correct. Let's zoom all the way in here and just make sure we're nudged all the way into the corner. You see we're 1 pixel off. M is our hotkey for the marquee tool. Nudge that to the right and up. Let's just check our other corner, and we're all lined up perfectly. Great. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. And what I want to do here is just fill this with kind of a light gray. So let's bring up the color picker here, and I've got the color I want to use written down right here. It is E7, E9, EA. It's a very light gray. Hit OK. And Alt backspace, Option Return to fill that in. Command or Control D to deselect. It's going to look very, very contrasting right now. Don't worry about that. It's just because our date holders are black. We're going to clean that up right now. What we want to do is go ahead. We're just going to select 1st week, and I'll go with, this is probably that, yep, the square up there in the top corner. And we're going to start applying some layer styles to this. We're going to start with Layer, Layer Style, Color Overlay. So we're going to adjust that color right now. I'm going to double click, or just actually single click on the color swatch, and we're going to punch in a color, F0, F4, F7. Again, an extremely light gray, a little bit lighter even than the stroke that we applied to it. We also want to go ahead and apply an inner shadow. So we're going to go ahead and tick on inner shadow, and I'm going to set the blend mode to normal, and we're going to change the color to white. It's more like an overhead highlight, what we've got going on here. Set the opacity to 50. uncheck use global light, set the angle to 90, set the distance to 1, and the size to 0. Hit OK. That is our layer style. It doesn't look like much, but again, let's get all of these guys using this layer style and just see. It's a very subtle effect. Now, the way we're going to do this is by copying this layer style. So we're going to go layer, layer style, copy layer style. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to open up all of my groups in my layers panel, just like so. And I'm going to select the bottommost layer here, the original SQ layer. Holding down my shift key, I'm going to select the topmost layer without a layer style. You can even actually select the layer with the layer style. Why not? And then we're going to go layer, layer style, paste layer style. And bam, just like that, all of our square shapes get that awesome little overglow, that little almost pseudo embossment, if you will, or whatever. So that's that. Now that we've done that, we're ready to move on. Let's start adding some gradients to these top shapes. I'm going to grab day names here, and we're going to go layer, layer style, and let's start with a drop shadow here. We're going to go ahead and give this a very gray drop shadow. So let's go up here and just grab a sort of a light gray. We can adjust this as we look at it. Just hit OK. This is really going to behave as a stroke that's only on the bottom of the shape. You can see it's giving us a funky, if I make it black again, you can see where that's showing up right there at the bottom of that shape. We're going to go ahead with a light gray, and we're probably going to adjust this later. We're going to set the blend mode. Let's go with normal and set the opacity to 100%. Don't use global light. Set the angle to 90 degrees. 1 pixel of distance. No pixels in size. And I'm actually going to hit OK, and we're going to zoom way in here. And that's too dark. That gray right there is too dark. I want to make it a little bit more subtle. It doesn't maybe look as subtle right now, or it might look very subtle, excuse me, right now, comparatively speaking, but it's only because we've got this extreme dark above it in the form of this giant black bar. So let's double click on that again, open that guy up, and we're going to make this a little bit more of a subtler gray. So we're going to go something about like that. We want it to be a little bit darker than the color of our stroke. I'm going with D2, D2, D2. Hit OK. And now we're ready to move on and add the gradient overlay. So go gradient overlay, and we're going to open up the gradient editor, and whoa, hello. We're going to create a new gradient here. Let me just fix this. And we're going to go with a simple 2-color gradient. We're going to double click on the black stop, and we're going to start with EB, 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 very light gray. And we're going to run it to, let's go with F4, 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 lighter gray. Hit OK, OK, and that looks great. Everything looks just like we want it. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. Now that we've done that, let's zoom out just a touch. And let's add the gradient up here to this thicker top bar. So I'm going to select month, and we're going to start off with, we're actually going to start with a little bit of an inner shadow first. We're going to go layer, layer style. Let's go inner shadow. And this is going to be a normal blend mode. We're just going to make this white. Again, we're using inner shadow for a highlight, not really a shadow. Uncheck use global light. Set the angle to 90 degrees. Set the distance to 1 pixels, the size to 0 pixels. There we go. So you can see it's just a nice little subtle line across the top. Let's actually reduce the opacity, knock it down to around 40 or so. Now we're going to go ahead and apply gradient overlay. Now this gradient overlay is going to be dark green going to a lighter green. So I've got the colors written down here. I'm going to double click on the darker stop, and I'm going to go with 8BC620. Helps if you have it highlighted. 8BC620. There we go. Darker green, hit OK, double click on the lighter stop, and this color is BCD E4B. So an even lighter green, and hit OK. OK again, and that looks just great. Hit OK to commit those changes. Wonderful. Let's zoom out just a little bit. And what I want to do before we go much further is I want to punch a couple holes in the top of our calendar here from which the calendar would hang. So create a new layer by hitting the new layer icon, and we're just going to name this punch out. And I'm going to grab my elliptical marquee tool. I'm just going to draw out a nice little circle here, something maybe about that big, and I'm going to fill it with, you can fill it black or white, color doesn't really matter. Command or Control D to deselect. Now I'm going to select my move tool, and we're just going to nudge this guy over to about the corner approximately, and I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm just going to nudge it to the right to really move it in a good deal, maybe 2. That looks good, and then I'm going to nudge it down a couple. Great. I'm going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and I'm just going to drag it right across to about where we had it before, and then I'm going to nudge it to the left, 1, holding down my shift key, 2. So right there, we're about centered. We're going to center it up in just a second. I'm going to shift click both of these layers and hit Command or Control E to merge them together. You can see that they're both now on the same layer. Great. Now that we've done that, let's just make sure it's aligned horizontally. Control click or command click the month layer thumbnail. It's going to load that layer as a selection. And if you've got the move tool active, which is what you want, look at the options. We get some alignment options here. Go ahead and align this to the center. Okay, there we go. Wonderful. Command or Control D to deselect. Now that we've done that, Command or Control click the punch out layer. It's going to load those little circles as a selection. Shut this layer off. So hit that little eyeball. Get them out of there. Now that we've done that, we're going to select the month layer, and we're going to hold down our Alt or Option key, and we're going to set this as a mask. Holding down the Alt or Option key is going to fill those circles with black, hence punching a hole in this green. So there we go. Select that, and you can see we've punched holes right through the top of our calendar. Let's create the clasps, which are going to run through these holes that we just punched in here. So go ahead and grab the rounded rectangle tool, and we're going to do a couple things. We want to set it to draw shape layers, and we want to set the corner radius to 5 pixels. Once we've done that, go ahead and set your foreground color to, let's go with sort of a medium gray. Let's go with 7E, 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 something like so. Hit OK. And now let's zoom in, and we're going to draw our first clasp. Let's go like so, a little bit thinner. There we go. Drop that guy right in there, and it didn't take our foreground color, so I'm just going to select color here, and we're just going to manually punch in 7E, 7E, 7E. Hit OK. Great. We're going to duplicate this layer, Command or Control J, and just drag it straight across to the other hole. So I'm going to grab the Move tool, hold down my Shift key, slide him right across there, and we're all aligned with the holes we've punched through this calendar. Now we're going to make these look like little metal clasps. So let's go ahead here with shape 1, and I'm going to go layer style. Let's start with a little bit of a drop shadow, and I'm going to uncheck use global light. I'm going to set the angle to -90. We want the shadow to be cast upward, sort of into the wall. Set the opacity to 60%, the distance to 2, and the size, we will only leave the size at 5 actually. Now let's go ahead and apply an inner shadow. And with the inner shadow, I'm going to set the blend mode to normal. I'm going to set the color just full on white, and opacity 100%. We're going to set the angle here, uncheck use global light, set the angle to 30 degrees, set the distance to 3, and the size to 1. So we've got a nice little shine happening here. That looks very cool. And now we're going to go ahead and apply a bevel and emboss. Inner bevel, smooth. Let's bump the depth up to about 250. Leave the direction as up. The size can stay at 5. That's great. 120 and 30 is wonderful. We're going to change the gloss contour. Let's go with this sort of roller coaster downhill looking one. Probably as a name. If you hold the mouse over it long enough, it'll eventually tell you. But we're too lazy to wait for that. Let's set the opacity to 50%. The correct term would actually be impatient, not lazy. We're going to set the opacity for the highlight to 100%. A shadow opacity is 50%. All right, wonderful. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and apply a stroke to this. So we're going to go stroke, and we're going to set the size to 1, and we're going to set the color to just 66666, all 6s. Go ahead and hit OK. Great. Now that we've done that, we've got a little metal clasp, and actually I'm probably going to make this a little bit narrower because you can see that it's really just a touch too big. So I'm going to hit Command or Control T and just drag it in from one side just a little bit, and commit those changes hitting the Enter key. And now I'm offsetting the hole, which actually I don't mind it being a little offset. That's actually kind of cool. Now that I'm thinking about it, let's just delete this top layer instead of copying these layer styles over, since we resized the shape, and just hit Command or Control J to duplicate that layer and drag this guy right over. And there we go. Just like that, we're sharing those shapes, and we've got our 2 metal clasps. And looking at it completely zoomed out, I'm not quite digging the way that it's looking plunging into the calendar, so let's just add a little bit of sort of afterthought burning, if you will. Feel free to do this. I'm going to go up here above the clasp layers, which are these 2 gray shapes, apply a new layer, and I'm just going to call this, oops, I'm going to double click just the name. I'm going to call this burn, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Now I'm going to grab my brush tool, and a 10 pixel soft brush is probably perfect. Maybe just make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to set the opacity of the brush to let's go with 30%, painting with black, and I'm just going to click a couple times on both ends of these clasps so they sort of look like they're really curving way around, either into our calendar or into the wall. So there we go. Adds a little added element of realism. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and grab the text tool. So grab the text tool and set the foreground color to white, and we're just going to type out a word here. I'm going to say March 2012. That's when I'm recording this tutorial. However, if this is a calendar you're using in like a web interface or something like that, you're probably going to want some arrow buttons. So let's just punch in a couple little arrows quickly. I'm going to go spacebar, Alt 175 on the number pad. It's going to give me a little chevron arrow. And I'm going to go Alt 174, which is going to give me the left pointing chevron arrow on the other side of March, and then space. I'm holding Control and I'm just hitting Enter. It's going to commit those changes. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to zoom in a little on this text. I'm actually probably going to upsize it a little bit. I'm going to Control click the month layer first, and I'm just going to align it to the center, and I'm going to align it to the other center. So vertical and horizontal centers. And a quick tip here, when you're working with type that you know you're going to be centering a lot, it's usually a good idea to go in to the paragraph panel and just align the text center. That way, if we wanted to change this guy to like October, it's going to automatically sort of recenter itself. It's going to give us some assistance. So just keep that in mind. However, I'm going to go back to March. There we go. And maybe one quick thing we want to do is just lift these arrows up a little bit. Double click to highlight all the text. And just highlight one of the chevron arrows. Go to the character panel, and you've got this little text raising icon. I'm not sure what the official name of it is. If you hover over it long enough, it'll tell you. And just nudge that up 1 point. I'm going to do the same for the left pointing arrow. Nudge it up 1 point. Oh, it's already up 1 point. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. Commit those changes. There we go. And we have our text. I'm actually going to double check it here. Let's make it just a little bit bigger. Let's see what 14 point looks like. I don't think that's too bad. Let's stick with 14 point. And now we're going to add some layer styles to this. So we're going to go up to layer, layer style. We're going to do color overlay first. And I'm just going to set a color overlay of white. And we're just going to do this just because we're probably going to reuse this style later, and I just want to make sure that whatever text we apply it to is going to be colored white, because without white, we're not going to get sort of the little funky letterpress effect that we're going for. We're going to add a drop shadow of black, and we're going to set the blend mode to normal, set the opacity to 20%, very subtle, uncheck use global light, set the angle to -90, and just set the distance to 1 pixel and the size to 0. So you can see just kind of a neat little letterpress effect, just like so. Now let's move on and dump in the little abbreviated names for the days of the week. So again, grab the text tool, and I'm actually going to set my foreground color to black because it's a lighter background we're working on, or the text color to black, excuse me. And we're going to just type in the word sun, commit those changes, and we need to resize this first and foremost. So I'm going to open up my character panel. We're going to resize this all the way down. Let's go 6 point, that's too small. 8, that's about right. We don't want bold, we're going to go regular. And you can mess around with the anti-aliasing to see if you get a better shape. You can try, actually sharp looks pretty good. I like that a lot. We're just going to stick with sharp. And what I'm going to do, because I have snapping turned on, it should pretty much snap you to the center of these squares. So I'm going to first align this down in the squares. I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate this, drag it right over, and it's going to snap in place, but I'm going to rename it Mun. And there we go. We snap to the approximate center there. And again, I've got these guys aligned center as well, just because the letters are different size and things like that. We just want to be as close to center as we can be. Duplicate Mun, and I'm just going to name it 2. Commit those changes, drag them right over. There we go. And I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to finish filling these guys out, and I'll be back in just a second. Sweet, there it is. I'm going to close my character panel. I don't really need it right now. And I'm going to grab all these guys, all of these name marker layers, and I'm going to drop them into a layer group, Command or Control G, and I'm just going to name them day names. I'm going to open that layer back up, however, because we're not done working in here yet. Let's grab one of these. I'm just going to work with the sat layer to start, and I'm going to go layer, layer style, color overlay, and we need to drop a color onto this text. Whoop, we don't want to mess with the 3D panel back there. The color I'm going to use is, highlight that, and just go A6, A6, A6. It's just sort of a lighter medium gray. Hit OK. And we're also going to apply a drop shadow to this. So there's our text right there. I'm going to tick on drop shadow, and I'm going to set the blend mode to normal. I'm going to set the color to white. The opacity, let's bump it up to like 80. Uncheck use global light, set the angle to 90 degrees. And again, the distance of 1 and the size of 0. Just a nice little sharp cut at the bottom of our letters. Go ahead and hit OK. And now I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, and I'm just going to drag this layer style to the rest of these layers, just like so. You can use the same technique we used before, where we right-clicked and went for a copy layer style, or up here, layer, layer style. But this is just a little shortcut. Whoop. Hold down your Alt or Option key and just drag right to the other layer. Great. Now we can select this whole day names group. I'm going to grab my Move tool, and we're just going to nudge these guys right up here to the bar that they're supposed to sit in, just like so. Zoom back out to 100%. Our calendar's making great progress. And now we have the unenviable job of going in and dropping in all of the actual dates. Couple tips. I'm just going to set up the first few, and then I'm going to pause the video and finish off the calendar and leave you to do your calendar. You want to make sure, well, first let's grab the type tool and let's just do it together here for the first one. I'm going to set the text color to black. We're going to start with black. And we're going to set the size to, let's go with 12 points, bold. I'm just using the font face of Arial. You can use whatever you want. I'm going ultra simplistic, just plain Jane. I'm going to drop in the number 1 right here for Thursday because I'm copying my March calendar hanging here on the wall. I'm going to grab my move tool. Again, I have snapping turned on, so I'm snapping to these layers. So this should kind of snap to the middle. And also just remember to keep your paragraph aligned center. It's going to help you out later on when we get to the point where we're hitting double digits. Now that we've done that, duplicate this over to Friday, which is the 2nd, and duplicate this over to Saturday, which is going to be the 3rd. There we go. I'm going to pause the video. Well, actually, before I do that, check this out. We never adjusted our anti-aliasing, so the letters are looking a little rough. I'm going to select all 3 of these text layers. We're going to open up the character panel, and I'm going to go for either strong or smooth, probably smooth. That looks great, and there we go. We've corrected that little kind of jagginess of those numbers. And I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to fill out the rest of this calendar, and we'll make a couple adjustments when I get back. And we're back. Calendar is almost done. What we want to do, though, is these blank spaces. Typically, calendars leave them blank. However, we're going to sort of show either the days that are to come in the next month. You can see here at the end of March, we just run right to the end of the calendar, literally. But we have sort of the tail end of February we can fill in up here in this blank space. If we had space down here on the bottom line, we would do like 1, 2, 3 for the first 3 days of April. April will be the month that comes after March. So let's go ahead and grab 4, 5, and 6 here, drag these guys right up to these top slots, and just knock out the last couple days of February, which we're going to drop in there. So in the layers panel, I'm going to select 4 through 7, and I'm going to hold down my Alt key, and I'm going to drag these guys straight up. They're going to snap right to the middle. Awesome. Now, this is just a little organization peeve that I have. What I want to do is make sure I'm keeping track of these layers, so I'm going to drag these guys down to the very bottom of my numbers layers. So you can see 4, 5, 6, 7 copy, which are going to become the end of the days of March. So let's start over here, which was 29, excuse me. Tuesday was the 28th. Monday would be the 27th. And Sunday would have been the 26th. So now we have 26, 27, 28, 29, rolling right into 1 through 31. I'm going to grab all of these days, and I'm just going to select them, all the layers, Command or Control G to group them, double click, name that group, days. Great. Now that we've done that, we're ready to start applying layer styles to these numbers to make them look all snazzy. And also we want to add some kind of variation to the days from February. So if there are people out there who aren't familiar with the way a calendar works, they'll easily be able to tell that's a different month. Or people who are familiar, they're going to quickly be able to deviate between last month, this month kind of thing. Let's go ahead and apply first a color overlay. So let's just start with 31. I'm going to work with that, and then we'll just copy this layer style across the board. Layer style, color overlay, and we want to set this color overlay to sort of a medium-ish gray. Let's go 8C, 8C, 8C. There we go, a little bit darker than medium gray. And we also just want to apply an outer glow to this. We're going to do an outer glow, blend mode normal, opacity of 100%. Again, it's going to be somewhat hard to notice because we are over a light gray background, but it is there, and subtlety is key. Subtlety is a big deal. Set the spread to about 40%. It's really going to push that outer glow out, and just set the size to 1 pixel. So we're almost just giving it a 1 pixel stroke, but not really. Sort of a faded stroke. Go ahead and hit OK. And what we're going to now do is just duplicate this layer style across all these layers. So we'll go layer style, copy layer style. Select layer 30 here and scroll all the way back to layer 1. Let's actually go all the way back to 26 because we're just going to change the color of 26 through 29. And go layer style, paste layer style. There we go. Our calendar now has even a slight impress look for our days. And what we want to do for these not March days, the February days, is let's just double click on the 26 layer. And I'm just going to change the color overlay. We're going to make it a little bit lighter, essentially, is what we're going to do. So something like that, maybe even a little bit lighter. There we go. C7, 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 78% brightness. Hit OK. Hit OK. And I'm just going to Alt drag these styles right up to the other layers. So there we go. We can quickly differentiate. There's February. There's March. All we really have left at this point is a little bit of just sort of tying up the loose ends. We want to sort of indicate what the current day is. So today's the 1st. We're going to go ahead and just highlight the 1st. And then we're going to go ahead and add just a couple other little things that you see sort of in the Apple calendars on the various devices and interfaces that Apple has created. So what we need to do to indicate the current day is just let's go to first week here. And actually, let me just show you a quick tip. Let's say today is the 1st, okay? So we need to change the background behind number 1. Well, we've got a bajillion little squares, and they're all named the same thing. How do we quickly select that? Grab your Move tool and just Command or Control click that gray square, and it's going to say, bam, there's the layer you need. See that? That's that layer. Super cool. Double click that layer to bring up layer styles. We're going to go color overlay, and we're actually just going to make the sort of active day marker a very light green. Let's choose as light a green as we have up there in our gradient. Maybe make it a little bit lighter, just like so. Hit OK, and hit OK again. Ignore the fact that the text looks really bad, because what we also need to do is just copy the layer style from this March 2010 type down to our gray type. This is why we wanted to set that color overlay for our text up here, because I knew in the back of my mind I wanted to copy this layer style to our active date number. So I'm going to collapse that. Let's go to March right here. I'm going to go layer, layer style, copy layer style, and let's find up here in days. Let's go down to 1. There we are. Layer, layer style, paste layer style. And there we go. We've got the impressed 1 in the active day. Now, one other thing Apple does, or we see in these sort of web interfaces in general, I guess I should say, is we've got little circles sort of indicating tasks on that day. So again, I'm going to create a shape layer, and I'm just going to create a tiny little circle, something like that, very, very small. I'm going to fill it with white, so the active day task markers are going to be white. Let's just nudge that over so it's centered sort of as best as we can get it. And again, we're going to paste that same layer style, paste layer style, just to give it a slight impress, just like so. Now, if you have other tasks coming up in the month, just duplicate this layer, and what we're going to do is we drag it down. Let's go down to like the 14th here, something like that. And we can just give it like a blue or a green, or really there's all kinds of different color coding that they have in a lot of these calendar softwares. The reason it's not changing colors is because we still have that layer style applied to it. We don't want that layer style, so I can right click on it, but that's going to run me off screen. So I'm going to go layer, layer style, clear layer style, and now we've got our nice little blue ellipse. So you can see just like that, we know we've got a task coming up on the 14th, let's say. You can do all kinds of different colors. And just like that, let's just back it out a little bit to 100%. And there you go. You've created this calendar. It took a little bit of legwork and effort, but it's definitely a graphic that you can save and quickly drop into websites you're creating. It's very modern looking, very cool. I got a little bit of pop to it. So that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you stuck around for the whole thing and learned a thing or two. And thank you for watching. Go check out the site. That's www.tutvid.com for more great free video tutorials.